In our previous video about the Spanish moods and tenses, we reviewed the structure of a sentence that contains a verb in the subjunctive mood. Remember, it's an expression in the main clause that triggers the use of the subjunctive in the dependent clause. Let's take a look at an example. I don't believe that it is good that you eat junk food. No creo que sea bueno que tú comas comida chatarra. As you can also see in the example, the sentence has the proper structure to include a subjunctive expression. Subject 1 plus verb 1 in the indicative tense, plus que plus subject 2, which is different from subject number 1, and verb number 2, which is in the subjunctive tense. Now we will learn more about which subjunctive tense you should use. The tense of the dependent clause depends on the tense of the main clause. To make it easier to determine what tense to use in the subjunctive, we've divided them into the time periods expressed in the main clause, that is, either the present, future, or past conditional combination. To begin, let's take a look at the present, where our subjunctive choices are present subjunctive or present perfect subjunctive. Tense sequence in the present. How do we choose between these two tenses? By looking at the time the second action occurred in the dependent clause in relation to the time of the first action, which is in the main clause. If the action in the dependent clause occurs at the same time or after the action in the main clause, the present subjunctive is used. For example, I doubt that we will miss the test. I doubt indicates uncertainty about someone's action missing the test. Now that we know we need to use a subjunctive tense, we need to determine which one to use. Since missing the test is a possible future action, we would select the present subjunctive tense for the dependent clause. If the action in the dependent clause occurs before the action in the main clause, the present perfect subjunctive is used. For example, it's important that you have studied for the test. It's important is an opinion about someone else's actions, not a certainty, so we know we need to select a subjunctive tense. Since the studying may have already happened before we gave an opinion, we would select the present perfect subjunctive tense. Now we will take a look at the tense sequence in the past. When the main clause, which is in the indicative mood, is in the past tense or conditional tense, the dependent clause, which is a subjunctive, must be in a past tense as well. Easy way to remember it is combine past with the past. If the verb in the dependent clause takes place at the same time or after the action in the main clause, the imperfect subjunctive is used. For example, I was, I have, I had, I would be happy that you have visited my family. If the verb in the dependent clause takes place before the verb in the main clause, the pluperfect subjunctive is used. For example, I was, I have, I had, would be happy that my family had visited my family. Sometimes deciding in which chronological order the two actions in the main and the dependent clause happened is not very easy. However, some key words and connectors can be used as a hint. For example, notice the word ya, already, usually indicates that the action in the dependent clause happened before the main clause, so a subjunctive past tense will be used. There are two other uses for the subjunctive mood we need to cover. Those in clauses that begin with if or si in Spanish. Remember, subjunctive is used because if implies uncertainty. The first type of clause expresses something contrary to fact in the present. The result is thus seen as impossible and is expressed using the imperfect subjunctive. If you spoke Spanish, but you don't, you'd be able to talk to my family. The second type of clause is used to talk about situations that are contrary to past fact. The result clause thus expresses an unrealized past possibility using the conditional perfect tense. If you had studied Spanish but you didn't, you would have been able to talk to my family. Now that we've explained the sequence of tenses and showed you some examples, here is an easy way to remember the sequence. Combine the present or future with the present or present perfect subjunctive, present with present. Combine the past or conditional imperfect with the imperfect or pluperfect subjunctive, past with past. Here are some sites where you can practice these concepts and get immediate feedback. Buena suerte!